All right, so today we're diving into something super cool, the connection between music and color.
Ooh, that's a good one.
Yeah, and,
Yeah.
and we've got this awesome listener material about, like, composing music that's inspired by Holi.
Oh, wow.
Holi, right?
The Hindu festival of color. Right, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah,
Where they're like throwing all that colored powder and stuff, right?
yeah, it's such a, like, visually stunning event, right? Like, all of the colors and the energy.
It's a huge celebration of like spring and new beginnings, right?
Yeah, and the triumph of good over evil, too, right? It's got that whole symbolic layer to it as well.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
So I'm really excited to dig into, like, how do you even begin to translate that kind of visual spectacle into music?
That's a great question. Yeah.
Yeah.
And the listener material actually talks about something called synesthesia.
Synesthesia.
Synesthesia, yeah.
Okay.
And it's this really cool neurological phenomenon where like one sense gets stimulated and it triggers an experience in a completely different sense.
Oh, wow.
So like a classic example is people who have synesthesia might see sounds as colors.
Whoa.
Like they'll hear a certain note and they'll see a burst of blue or a chord will sound like, a swirl of green.
So, like, if someone with synesthesia was actually at Holi, like, they might literally be seeing the music in the colors, right?
Exactly. Yeah, that's a really good point.
That's wild.
Yeah, it's like their senses are all kind of intertwined in this amazing way.
So it makes you think about, like, composing music for Holi,
Mm.
almost like you're trying to recreate those synesthetic experiences, even for those of us who don't, naturally have it.
Right, exactly.
Like, how do you capture that in the music itself?
Well, and that's what's so cool about the source material you sent is it actually digs into what they call the interrelated dimensions of music,
Okay.
which is a fancy way of saying like the building blocks of how you create a composition.
Okay. Yeah.
So think about it like this. You've got the structure, right? Which is like the overall form, how the music is organized. Then you've got texture,
Mm-hmm.
which is all about like the layers of sound. Like, are you using a single instrument or are you using like a whole orchestra?
Okay. Yeah.
Then there's tempo, right? So that's the speed, how fast or slow the music is.
Mm-hmm.
And we can't forget about dynamics,
Oh, yeah.
which is how loud or soft the music is played.
Right.
And then there's timbre,
Okay.
which is kind of a cool one because it's like the unique color or quality of a sound. Like a trumpet sounds different from a violin, even if they're playing the same note,
Right.
And then, of course, you've got pitch and duration.
Mm-hmm.
Pitch is about the high and low notes, and duration is how long each note is held.
So those are, like, what, the basic elements of music?
Yeah, exactly. Like your musical toolkit.
That's a pretty big toolkit.
It is. And the idea is that you can use all these different elements to evoke different colors or emotions, right?
So, okay, like, how would you use that toolkit to represent, like, the actual colors of Holi?
Ooh, that's a great question.
Yeah.
Well, let's take the color red, for example.
Okay.
Red is often associated with passion, with energy, right?
Yeah.
So to capture that musically, you might use a really fast tempo.
Yeah.
A driving rhythm, like something that really gets your heart pumping.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe you use a really bright, powerful timbre.
Okay.
Like a trumpet, for instance.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Or a powerful electric guitar, even. Something with a lot of bite.
Mm-hmm.
And then you play it loudly, Really emphasize those dynamics.
Okay. Yeah.
But then on the other hand, let's say you want to represent a color like green.
Oh.
Green is often associated with peace, with tranquility, nature.
Mm-hmm.
So for that, you might go for a much slower tempo,
Okay.
some flowing melodies,
Mm-hmm.
and instruments with softer, gentler timbres,
Okay.
like a flute or a harp even.
So it's almost like you're painting with sound, right?
Mhm.
Like you're using these musical elements, like colors on a canvas.
Exactly, yeah, you're spot on.
That's so cool.
And a really talented composer, they can even like layer those different timbres on top of each other to create these really complex textures.
Yeah.
Kind of like the way that colors blend and swirl during Holi.
Oh, yeah.
Like imagine you're hearing a vibrant sitar melody intertwining with the like deep resonance of a tabla drum.
Yeah.
It's like those colors are merging right there in your ears.
Wow. That's really vivid. Yeah.
It is, isn't it? It's really powerful stuff.
And it makes me think of something else that was mentioned in the material. Graphic scores.
Oh, yes, graphic scores.
Can you tell me a little bit about those? Like, I've heard of them, but I'm not really sure what they are.
Yeah, so graphic scores are really interesting because they kind of ditch traditional musical notation.
Okay.
Like instead of having those notes on a staff that you typically see, right?
Mm.
Composers use symbols and shapes and sometimes even colors to represent the sounds.
Really? Wow.
Yeah, so it's like a more visual, a more abstract way of like notating music.
It's almost like taking that synesthesia concept
Yeah.
and like putting it directly on paper, right?
Yeah, you're seeing the music.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a really cool way to like break free from those traditional conventions and really explore the visual side of sound.
And is it super specific or is it kind of open to interpretation? Like, how does that work?
It's really interesting because just like synesthesia is very individual, right?
Mm-hmm.
Graphic scores are also super open to the composer's interpretation.
Right.
So one composer might use like swirling lines to represent a crescendo, a gradual increase in volume, right? But then another composer might use blocks of color to represent different instrumental sections.
Wow.
So it's really up to the composer's imagination and how they want to convey those musical ideas visually.
So it's almost like an abstract painting in a way.
Yeah, exactly. It's a really cool art form.
That's awesome.
Yeah, and it makes you wonder, like, did the composer that, was mentioned in the material, did they ever consider using a graphic score to represent Holi?
Yeah, with how visual it is.
Exactly right. I mean, they're talking about translating visual elements into music, so a graphic score would be like a perfect way to do that.
Yeah, that's a really cool thought.
It is, isn't it?
This has been such an eye-opening conversation, It's really made me think about how music can not only represent color, but even recreate those synesthetic experiences.
And what's really fascinating to me is it makes you think about the subjectivity of art, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like how one person hears a color might be completely different from how someone else hears it.
Yeah, that's a good point.
It's really cool.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Well, this brings us to a final thought to kind of leave you with.
Oh, okay.
If you were to actually create a piece of music inspired by Holi, right?
Yeah.
What colors would you choose?
Oh.
And how would you use all these musical elements to kind of bring those colors to life?
Yeah.
Would you stick with traditional notation or would you maybe even experiment with a graphic score?
That's a great question.
Something to think about, right?
Yeah, it really gets you thinking about the material and how you would approach it yourself.
Yeah, for sure. Well, thanks for joining me for this really colorful deep dive, I guess you could say.
It's been colorful. It's been a lot of fun.
Yeah, and we hope it's inspired you to think about music in a whole new way. So
Definitely.
thanks for listening.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
See ya.